Yeah, so I'm Sarah Squiers, and I work for the only growing media company in the United States, Televisa Univision now. And I'm joined by Samir here. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samir Agarwal. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Clinique North America at the Estée Lauder companies.
And we are going to talk today about inclusive marketing. So, and to be totally honest, because I work at Televisa Univision, it is going to be from a Hispanic Latino lens. So, over the past year, we've seen a lot happen with the industry, right? So we've seen companies that were sort of talking about inclusive marketing actually be charged with doing something about it. And it's amazing what the combination of a global pandemic and a social injustice movement at the same time will do. But it did cause people to take a pause. And just to sort of level set everybody in the room today, um, currently, if you are looking at doing DE and I correctly, you cannot do it without Hispanics and Latinos because they represent 45% of the multicultural marketplace in this country. So not including them is dipping your toe in a lot of different places, which is all good too, but we're also business people. And when you take a look at this consumer base, they're 60 million strong. They are representing now over 53% of our population growth over the next 20 years. So they're not only our now and our future, but more importantly, they're incredibly aspirational. We take a look at inflation and things that are happening here today, and this consumer group, because of where their parents or grandparents came from and dealt with a lot worse, kind of laugh at it, right? That's kind of a good thing because they are driving all the growth in the categories that make our country healthy, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Auto sales, um, insurance, finance, tech, totally leading in tech. So the importance of inviting them in culture and language and where they are is very important. And what Samir and I are going to talk about is Estee, Lauder, Clinique, specifically, their entry into the marketplace. What's so great about this is that the Latino face has no budget,
Something like that, yes. Something like that.
which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So I want to start high level, though.
Sure.
How do you think the industry is doing with
Yeah.
inclusive marketing
You
in the
know,
past year?
I think it's hard to say that we aren't making progress, right? I think we all, probably all of us as marketers, see the opportunities that you're talking about, Sarah. And I think that we're all trying to do the same thing, right? Which is find this consumer and make sure we're reaching her in the right way, or her or him in the right way. And when I think about I think in some cases we're falling short. There's probably two things. One is I think we keep talking about those consumers as if they're one group. And I think there's a big opportunity, particularly in beauty, which is the industry I work in, to celebrate the diversity within the diversity. This is an incredibly complex consumer group with many layers of origin, many layers of age and levels of acculturation and identities tied to past countries as well as current country. And so I think what you see a lot out there is I think a lot of brands that are still sort of saying, there's a group out there I want to go get, versus really trying to understand the complexity within the group and then figuring out the right approaches. So that's one that I think is a big part. And then I think secondly is it's not just about reach, right? I think one of the I'm kind of like old school in the way that I think about these things, but I think a lot of great marketing always starts with consumer insights. And so I think having the media platforms to reach the consumer is one thing, but then really thinking about what are the ways that you can become part of their culture is another, whether it be through media moments or whether it be through consumer insights that allow your messaging to be as sort of precise or as relevant as possible, I think is really important. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done there still to make sure that different brands feel like they're truly part of culture.
Yeah, recently we've been pulled into a lot of conversations about minority owned
Mhm.
and minority serving. Um, Companies checking boxes to say that they did something instead of truly wanting to move the needle with inclusive marketing. And we do know that it is good business. It does move the needle. With that, what were those early conversations that you had internally? You've been with the
Yeah.
company 2 years,
2.5 years.
two and a
Yeah.
half years. So how did you broach the subject with authenticity and honesty?
Yeah. So I want to share just a couple things about Clinique to set the stage for the conversation because I think it's really important. So one of the biggest dynamics around Clinique is we're a 50-year-old beauty company, and we're in a category driven by newness, right? So everybody's looking for the latest skincare product, the latest ingredient, the latest indie brand that's popping up, right? So it's really unique to be as big as we are and as old as we are and still trying to drive growth because all these other brands are coming in the marketplace all the time. The second thing that's unique about our business is that for those of you that aren't in beauty, we own a lot of the experiences that happen in store. So when you walk into a Macy's or walk into a Dillard's department store, that staffing is ours in a lot of cases, or at least trained by us. So the reason I offer those 2 points to start with is when you think about going back in our journey, we started by saying we want to make sure our counter experience, our in-store experience, is reflective of the consumer that we want to have. And so that was like 3 or 4 years ago. The team really, before I got there, started doing a lot of work around, do we have the right models represented in the visuals at counter? Are we training our staffing at counter to actually speak to this consumer in the right way? And then when I got there, though, I think one of the things that I started pushing the team on is like, are we doing enough to tell this consumer that we want them to come to us? Are we doing enough to do outreach to get to them? And when we started scrutinizing ourselves even more to say, okay, are we doing enough? As we did the research and we went to the consumer and said, what do you think of Clinique? And one of the things that came back very clearly, there's two things that came back really clearly. One was like, we love your products. We think they're aspirational. We think that they're well made. We believe they can serve our needs. But to be honest, we just don't see ourselves in your brand. We don't think that you actually value who we are as a consumer. And in some cases, consumers would say, like, we think you're the brand of like affluent white women, very directly, right? And so I think it was a really eye-opening moment for us to say to ourselves, like, as much as we've been trying to do this, are we doing enough of it? And that's where I think it led to a lot of big pivots over the last 1.5 to 2 years, where we've said, okay, how do we really drive representation? How do we really drive insights that can actually drive relevance and really push ourselves to do much more in this area? And I think we're starting to see sort of the fruits of that labor over the last 6 months or so, where we've really gone to market in a very different way towards this consumer.
You absolutely have. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from numerous people here today about, just putting somebody Latino or African American or Asian in a spot just isn't enough.
Right. It's table stakes.
It's table stakes. And everybody sees it and they know exactly what you're doing, and it doesn't feel good.
Right.
It doesn't feel authentic. You guys took a very different approach. First of all, I'm very proud of the fact that you took a look under the hood and found a learning that was a little painful,
Right.
but also one that you could leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it led to so much honest discussion around where we were falling short, and also across multiple parties, right? We've got a very complex organization that many of you guys work for organizations that do too, between global and local and who's producing assets and who isn't. But once we looked ourselves sort of like when we looked the truth straight in the eye, it was like, okay, obvious that we all had to band together to make this done, to get this done. So it was nice.
So everybody loves how things happen. So you activated in culture and in language. Tell me why.
So I think in terms of in language, we've consistently seen that native Spanish assets drive much better engagement, much better conversion across the board, right? But I think for us as a legacy brand, as I said, a 50-year-old brand, one of the big tasks that we have every day in our industry is getting people to rethink Clinique. So one of the interesting things is whether it's the Latina consumer or Gen Pop consumer, we have the highest aided awareness of any beauty brand that we track because of our history and our size and our scale. But one of the things that I think we've come to the conclusion on is that doesn't mean that people know what we stand for today, what our best products are today, and what the modern Clinique really is. They tend to think of us as their mother's brand across cultures. And so, going into certain moments of cultural moments, coming back with a Latina celebrity spokesperson and making sure that we have Spanish language assets forces people to rethink what they've assumed about Clinique, even though they know us and they like our products, but they've assumed that maybe we aren't for them. And all of those things get people to reconsider us and force them to rethink their relationship with the brand in a really good way, right? Because we're basically saying, like, we care about you as a consumer, we value what you bring to the table, and we want to reflect you in our brand, which is a big part of what we're trying to do.
And you did that very, very well in fourth quarter, especially around the Latin Grammys. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
You want me to talk about it? You want to talk about it?
Why don't you set it up and I'll jump in?
You jump in.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll say that like I said, I think one of the things we're trying to do is figure out what are those moments that allow Clinique to naturally be somewhere, and then allow people to say like, oh, wait a second, I wouldn't have expected Clinique to be here. And obviously, the Latin Grammys is a huge moment, a huge cultural moment for a younger Latina audience as well as an older Latina audience. And so we worked with Univision to do like a really interesting content partnership with some makeup artists who are actually working with. They're all Latina makeup artists who are well known within the community of sort of people who are beauty enthusiasts within the Latina community. And we had them working with different celebrities and different people across the Univision universe to actually do their makeup leading up to the Latin Grammys and prepping them for the moment. And so sharing all of their beauty tips. And so it was a nice way for us to say, okay, yes, the Latin Grammys are here. We aren't a music brand. We're not as hip as like some of the other brands that are out there, but how do we authentically have a role to play in this moment? And obviously like using makeup as that way in and using Latina makeup artists was a way for us to do that. And actually then again, reinforce the idea that like we are here for this community and we really want to be part of this community.
Yeah, it was really beautiful storytelling. And it's kind of like how what ESPN does with the game around the game.
Yeah.
You were absolutely the game around the game.
Exactly.
And I think also you guys showing up in sort of unexpected places with these pros, right? Telling the story from their lens,
Right.
not only the celebrity lens, was a
Totally.
really great connector.
Yeah, I think having them talk about Clinique and how it serves the needs of these consumers and this group of consumers and their unique skin needs or their unique makeup looks that they want, it just gave us we were basically borrowing their credibility to drive our credibility, which was really powerful.
So how are you measuring it?
So there's a couple things that we're doing. We actually have implemented a company-wide, actually, Latina sentiment tracker. So we're actually consistently every 6 months looking at 4 major markets in the U.S. and saying, okay, how are we tracking versus benchmark competitors around seeing people say that we're a brand they trust, a brand that represents me, all of those different equity measures that we think are really important. And so we're tracking that every 6 months to see if we're moving the dial across these things. Then obviously, as we're looking at these specific moments, right, like Univision's been a great partner in helping us understand what is the engagement on the assets, what is the repeat, what's the traffic driving to our website in the short term and things like that. So we've been really happy with the results. I mean, I've got to say, like, we're starting to see, like I said, a lot of this work that we, in terms of outreach, has started over the last 6 months to a year. But already our Latina sentiment tracker is starting to show movement around these key metrics. And during the moment of the Latin Grammys, we had great traffic going to Clinique.com. And so we were really happy with the fact that like those assets were driving exactly what we wanted in the moment.
Wonderful. So what's happening now? What are you doing now?
Yeah. So one of the interesting stories I'll share with you is thinking about cultural moments and actually breaking from the past as well as embracing sort of tradition is we're actually working on a new Mother's Day campaign with Univision right now. And it's interesting because the whole storyline is all about this idea around beauty rituals that are passed from mother to daughter. And also today, beauty rituals that are passed from daughters to mother as well. What's interesting about this story, though, is in this content is most people who know Clinique, like most women over the age of 30, when I say I work on Clinique, they say, I remember the moment that my mom first took me to the Clinique counter to get my first cleanser or makeup product or moisturizer. I'm sure some of you guys have a story where they relate to that, right? I see people nodding in the crowd, right? Where everybody relates to that story. But when I think about Gen Pop and we think about mother-daughter connection, like most teenagers, in some cases, don't want to shop some of the same distribution channels that their mother shopped. And 2, they don't want their mom to be the main source of where they're getting beauty tips, right? They just have like no interest in that. And so, but when you think about it from a Latina consumer, the relationship between mother and daughter and beauty being so ingrained in culture is very different. And so it's an interesting one where we're embracing, I think, a Clinique tradition and history, but we're doing it with the Latina consumer because it's much more authentic and relevant for them today. But I actually wouldn't do that with Gen Pop because it wouldn't be right, even though there are people who have been on the brand for a long time who says, no, that's part of who we are. But I really wouldn't. But in this case, it's a really easy thing to embrace. So I'm super excited about the content that we're doing. We're using 2 pairings of mother-daughter influencers that Univision introduced us to. And so we're going to be issuing that content over the next couple of weeks with Mother's Day coming up on May 8th. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he gets a 2-for-1 punch because he's doing U.S. Mother's Day and
Yes.
Mexican Mother's Day. So you get a 2-for-1 when you do that.
Yeah. And actually, sorry, that's the other thing is like as you guys get into these cultural moments, that's one of the things that we've learned over these years is Mother's Day isn't just a day in Latina culture. There's actually multiple Mother's Days, which actually I had never known. So I think this goes back to this idea around going deep into the insights around the community and really understanding them, not looking at them as one. Like every country of origin has a slightly different Mother's Day. And so that way we get to actually span a certain number of weeks with this creative, which we wouldn't have done otherwise. So, which is nice.
So there's a lot of people. If I were to ask everybody to raise their hand that wanted to be inclusive in their marketing, everybody would raise their hand. So I'm not going to force them to do that.
Yeah.
But some people get stuck, right? So I don't want to go in unauthentically. I want to make sure that everything's perfect. I'm afraid I'm going to do something and end up on page 6. I can say that
Right.
here. I can't say that in San Francisco. Nobody gets it. Um, so, what sort of advice would you give to people here today that are looking to get in
Yeah.
and are a little scared to get in um, about getting in?
Yeah, it's an interesting. There's a couple things that I would say. I think first, in terms of reducing the fear of getting in, I think if you're proud of your products, you should be communicating about your products. I think that consumers are consumers to some extent, and they want products that are better or differentiated or have a point of difference. So I think that's point number one. Is like that's the biggest thing. When I think about getting in to start with, though, and what I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and that I think is potentially like an example for other brands, is like first really asking this consumer what they think of your brand today and really deeply understanding that and not making any assumptions about it for the good, the bad, or the ugly. I think for us, it was really eye-opening to say, as proud as we are of this brand, there's so much more that we could be doing that we weren't doing the right way. And it wasn't until we all galvanized as an organization around that we were able to unlock certain things. So that's, I think, a big one, is like really taking that time to like scrutinize what they think of you today. And then the last thing I'll say as you go further down the journey is something I've already touched on a little bit, but this idea around consumer insights and consumer understanding, like, again, I think of myself as a little bit of an old school marketer in this way, because I think that we all are moving towards obviously data and data analytics and being very, very rational about some of the choices that we make as marketers. But I do think this idea around like driving emotional relevance through consumer understanding is still very, very important. And I don't think it's actually as like out of reach as it might feel in some cases. And so that's the other thing I'll say is like taking the time to invest in that stuff can be incredibly eye-opening, both in terms of how you talk about your brand and how you reach out to the consumer. So
Yeah, you mentioned an insight that I'd like to share with the group as well about, leading with an insight, the fact that Hispanic mothers and daughters, Hispanic women in general, just love to share. I remember when I first started working at Univision about 13 years ago, and I was meeting with some of our strategy and insights folks, and we were talking about beauty. And I went and I put on lipstick while we were talking, because I do that often. It's probably rude, but I do it often. And someone said, where'd you get that? It's a really cool color. And I'm like, oh, I can't remember. And they're like, that is so someone like you. And I'm like, what? And they're like, non-Latino women. I'm half African American, half Irish. I celebrate my inner Latina every day. But non-Hispanic women, when they have something special, they actually tend to hold it close and keep it to themselves. Latino women, when they find something special, they share it with everybody and make sure that everybody is privy to that product and or service. And it's a really interesting insight that I've always carried with me. That is a really interesting insight for engaging with Latinos. And someone the other day shared something with me that I hadn't seen. I'm stealing it now, so it's not my intellectual property. But they shared that Latino women are 2 times as more likely to refer a product. And when they refer a product to another Latino consumer, they're 65% more likely to buy it. And that's amazing.
yeah, it's the ultimate peer-to-peer network, right? It's like unbelievable. And you just really do have to focus on those core people that can influence the audience, right? And so it's totally true. It's totally true. We see it in everything that we're doing too. So very small audiences can have huge impact on your ability to drive sales. So
Well, great work. It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure working with you.
Oh, it's great. We're so proud of it.
It's so much fun. I know this sounds totally self-serving, but we are partners, and it just kind of fit with the day. With that, I think we can open it up to Q&A. I hope there's a ton of it. Safe room. Don't worry about asking any uncomfortable question. It won't leave the room. In fact, I was told that this is a non-media event, so it's not going to get out there if you say it. Any questions? Sorry, moderator, I took your job. Oh, come on. Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's a fair risk, right? I guess I don't know. This might sound unfair, but I feel like that risk is always out there, right? We're always putting our brands out there in really, really prominent ways. We all are as marketers, and I don't think there's any greater risk with this consumer than anywhere else. I think it does go back to making sure that you are incredibly proud of the products that you make and really like believe in what you're delivering in some way, shape, or form. And then if there is an issue, like being very proactive about addressing it in ways that are appropriate, that we all have all learned about over the last few years, right? About making sure that we have the right responses, the right prep, and the right awareness around what might be culturally insensitive or sensitive. But it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. And I think in our case, because the work that we had done showed that they trusted our brand so much that they actually wanted to. I could feel that they wanted to hear from us. That they wanted us to say, we really, really value you as a consumer in a way that we hadn't done before. And so it didn't make me as nervous as that might suggest, right? So I think it's more opportunity than risk, for sure.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, if you were to survey the majority of Latinos, Hispanics in the United States and ask if they would rather be included in a product service message or excluded, they would pick included. I think the interesting nuance is that they just want you to show up where they are. And by doing that, you gain a ton of trust and a ton of respect. And research shows that they believe that you've earned their business by showing up. So don't be afraid to show up. It's a great question. Thanks for being vulnerable. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want me to start?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So we saw the largest upfront commitment to linear, streaming, digital, every product and service you can possibly imagine last year. It is a pin compared to the 500 plus marketers, companies that don't speak to this audience in culture and language, with a media company that reaches 76% of the market on a monthly basis and 83% are not reached in English. So there is some progress. I think that since we're in a safe room, I think the whole situation with Byron Allen scared a lot of people to do business a certain way that wasn't the right way to do business. I think marketers like yourself are tired of chasing audiences, and we're seeing the benefit of that because our capacity everywhere is growing. I mean, even broadcast television is up double digit year over year. I mean, I don't know how long this unicorn's going to last, but everything's growing, and I think that helps us. But myself and my colleagues who are here today still have to have numerous months-long conversations with companies and brands on the importance of the marketplace and courting them in culture and language to get the results that you need. So we got a long way to go, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll say for the Estée Lauder companies, I think every brand sees the opportunity that we see. We have obviously an incredible portfolio of really rich historied brands, whether it be La Mer or Estée Lauder brand or Bobbi Brown. So I think they're all seeing the opportunities that we see, and I think they're all trying to find their right way to go about doing it. We also have a culture of very healthy competition amongst the brands, so I'd like to think we're doing the best of any brand in the Estée Lauder portfolio. But no, I think they're all seeing it. They're all going after it and making the investment and the choices they need to make, and doing it I think they're all making progress in the right direction for sure.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How is this entrance into this marketplace? How have your leaders responded to it?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. So our global brand president is Michelle Ferrer, who's actually from Puerto Rico, and identifies as Hispanic and Latina. So she's been incredibly helpful. And in fact, in many ways, she's one of the ones that helped to galvanize, I think, the organization to say, hey, we need a Latina spokesperson. We need to invest in certain types of assets more aggressively. So that has been super positive. When I look across the organization from senior leadership, like our CEO and others that run the portfolio of brands and oversee the portfolio of brands, their response to our work has been incredibly positive. In fact, I've been taking one of our latest African American and Latina campaigns on a roadshow, and every brand leader has been like, okay, I've got to figure out how to do this in this way, because I think they're realizing that as good as our progress has been, there still is a lot more to do, including on our side. So
Look at you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I saw a panel at South by Southwest, and you brought this up at the beginning, on the delineation between media companies that reach diverse audiences, and this was on black-owned media, versus black-owned media companies. So getting to the point you made on Byron Allen scaring people away, in what area do you think he did that, and how hurtful was that to the progress that you guys are talking about here?
So Televisa Univision is not minority owned, but we are minority focused. I think how he hurt us and our marketplace, more importantly, is companies did an absolute pivot to satisfy a DE&I answer to African American. I can't tell you how many ad agencies, companies we spoke to. We're here to help. We'd like to help you engage. We can do it at scale. We have proven growth. We can do all of this for you. And heard, we are only focused on African American. And that's how I think it hurt our consumer. More than it hurt us, it hurt our consumers because they were left out of the conversation when they should be part of the conversation. They should actually be leading the conversation because of their scale.
And from my perspective on following that story, he took it much more from a transactional budget shifting as opposed to a value proposition of what you get out of it when you go in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very counterintuitive to how we do business. And it was a shock to us. You know, we weren't quite sure how to answer to that. You know, how do we continue to be humble servants when, you know, someone doesn't feel like they're playing nice in the sandbox? And I think the company and executives and all the employees handled it very, very well, with a lot of grace and humility and stewardship and offering to help. But at the end of the day, if that's where someone wants to put their money, that's where someone's going to put their money. I always tell people, if someone wants to come to Univision, put a bunch of money in a trash can and burn it, they can do it. Yes, sir.
I have kind of a random question. I recently attended Shop Talk. There was an executive director that was very passionate from Estee Lauder about Meta and NFT.
yeah.
How does the learnings with the Latino audience translate to that metaverse? Have you had any experience with that on the Univision side, or with any other products across the portfolio, anything like that?
So I'll share a couple things. I think one, I should preface this by saying I'm not an expert in the metaverse, and I'm not an expert in everything going on there. But one of the things that we have identified as an opportunity is the metaverse has the potential to actually be remarkably lacking in diversity, which is interesting, right? In terms of if you think about like the way avatars are created, the way avatars represent either idealistic forms of aspiration of look and feel and identity. And so I think there's actually a big opportunity to ensure that as the metaverse grows and as the audience that's actually engaged in the metaverse grows, that brands are being advocates for ensuring that it actually is representative of both inviting people to use it and enjoy it and be part of the community, but also making sure that actually the community itself is representative of the diversity that I think we're striving for in the rest of what we're doing. And so I do think there's big opportunity there. I continue to think the metaverse opportunity is nascent. And I think that brands that are playing there should be incredibly clear about their consumer objectives in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, who they're trying to influence, and why. And make sure that it, to some extent, goes beyond just PR coverage and goes really into consumer value driving initiatives. So sorry, that's actually the full extent of my metaverse understanding. So yeah.
And we're going deep into the metaverse, but we're doing it in a very different way than a lot of other companies. You see a lot of press about certain retail brands that are in the metaverse and going to be the first in the metaverse. We've decided to take a different lens from it. And we've always been held to a higher standard for results than probably any of our competitors. So we just look at things from a different lens. So we're going to go into the metaverse, but against already proven entertainment and sports properties that the consumer already loves. So, for example, we have the Youth Awards, Premios Juventud, which will be in Puerto Rico this year, which is one of the major metaverse cryptocurrency areas in the world. So part of that Youth Awards show is we're probably going to do a concert before in the metaverse, maybe with Maluma, and give a retail partner the opportunity to dress their avatar in their clothing, purchase that clothing so they can dress like their avatar. So we're looking at it from a very different lens of proven properties where the metaverse can be additive, not creating something brand new that's like trying to convince people to go there.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't wait to be poor in the metaverse and in real life. That's awesome. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.